Welcome back to the Soul Deep Science Podcast. I'm your host, Trey Brock, joined as always by Dr. GC Dilsaver. Doc, how you doing?
Fine, Trey.
Today, we wanted to talk a little bit about the symptoms and how mainstream mental health or a mainstream psychologist, a psychiatrist looks and deals with symptoms versus how in psychomoralytics we would handle that. Just to start off, a symptom as being a physical or a mental feature of somebody that points to a disease or points to something a lot deeper. That definition is not too different in psychomoralytics. I mean, they're pretty much the same, right, Doc?
Right. Symptoms, they're usually overtly observable. That would be especially in our health system. To behavioral or mental aberration would be a symptom. They would say so. And the symptoms are easily observable, and that's why if you go to a mental health provider, they're going to be able to tell you, what you're doing. I mean, it's a simple thing. So that's an easy part of it, symptomology. But again, the hard part then is, what is the etiology? What is the cause of those symptoms? And that's where the big difference between psychoanalytics and the mental health system come into play.
Yeah. So, I mean, the way I would kind of picture it in my head is somebody walks into a therapy session and they've got these manifestations. They're biting their nails, or they're, and the doctor's just, jotting all those things down and are they basing the disease or basing the illness off of those symptoms? Is that how they would do that?
Well, that's right. That's what they're in this big distinction that the symptomology of that is observed is how the diseases are classified in the mental health system. So they will classify, for instance, major depression as a constellation of certain symptoms. So if you have 4 out of 10 of these, then we'll diagnose you with major depression. And so that would be, for instance, loss of appetite, sleeplessness, loss of interest in past things that gave you joy, et cetera, et cetera. So then that's how they classify you as major depressed. So then what that means is that the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the Bible of the mental health system, has a classification of diseases based on symptoms. Classification of diseases or nosology. Now, that doesn't only differ from psychoanalytics, that differs as well from the mainstream mental health, mainstream medical professions, which are based on medical science and a nosology of causation or etiology, which is obviously the gold standard of any classification of disease. What causes this? What's the essence of this? And the second, way that often then will lead to the etiology is, how does this develop? So let's see how it develops, and we can trace it back and see, where it can be stopped, et cetera. But in the case of the DSM and the mental health classification of diseases, all based on this symptomology, which is really tantamount to quackery in medical value system. Now, psychoanalytics differs as well because we do not see a medical causation often in the symptomology, but we find it as well in the psychomoral or spiritual, psychological, soul deep realm. So you can have an etiology there. Now, again, some can have medical or physiological components to it, and especially exacerbations, but true psychological, psychomoral mal-being is that which emanates first and foremost comes from that soul, from the psychomoral response to a reality that is humiliating. And that can be a physical reality. It can be a physical debilitation, that causes that humiliation. But nonetheless, what exacerbates and what causes a person then to turn away from reality or to deal with it in a way that's detrimental to their well-being would be what we seek to alleviate.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how destructive the secular sort of soulless look on this would be, because if you have somebody who's coming in, they're seeking help, and the psychologist or whoever, the mental health professional, is misdiagnosing them because they're just looking at a symptomology, they're just looking at symptoms, and they misdiagnose them, and so therefore, their answer, their so-called remedy, obviously wouldn't work, because they have a misunderstanding of the cause of the problems that person has. And so I guess my question would be, what is the most destructive part of that whole process? You have that person, that soul that's going looking for help. They're being misdiagnosed. They're being given the wrong remedy, the wrong solution. And so, I mean, what happens to those people? What's the most destructive part of that process?
Well, first off, if somebody's with the medical, the so-claimed medical nosology of the DSM, it's just so-claimed. It's not medical. Again, it's based on symptomology. But that, nonetheless, does theorize. It's only theory about what the cause is. And as a medical model, supposed medical model, that cause is going to be biological. It's going to be in something the way the brain works. And so again, it's the chemistry of the brain is what the theory is. So again, in case of major depression, we theorize it's a lack of serotonin or dopamine between the synapses. So therefore, we're going to increase that to alleviate the depression. But see, the reasoning there is that they're theorizing this. And why do they theorize that? Because when they gave medications that were theorized to increase serotonin between the synapses, they noticed that depressive symptomology was alleviated. Oh, so therefore it must be this lack of serotonin between the synapses that causes that depression. See, now, so what they're saying is this is the same reasoning as this would be. I noticed I had this, so you see, I had some sort of a growth on my knee, and it was getting bigger and bigger, and it hurt like anything, man. So, but you know what? I took some aspirin, and I noticed that it alleviated that pain didn't hurt as much anymore, So what? That means what? I lack the ingredient aspirin, this acetylene acid, that I lack that in my system. That's why I have this hurt knee. So see that it's again, that's why it's quackery. I mean, it could be hit and miss theoretically, but it's but the real problem being is that, of course, if we're really talking about true psychological or soul deep mal-being, that's where the answer is going to be found. It's not going to be found in the physiology. It's not going to be found in the biology of the person. It's a non-physical entity that has, nonetheless, physical ramifications.
Yeah, and you see all the time on these commercials, these antidepressant commercials, and it's always somebody who's saying, well, I hopped on these meds and now I can get through the day. And this is really the essence of the episode that we're going to talk about is they're talking about how, now I can get through the day. Now I can, I can do the things that I wasn't able to do for a while. But I want I want to pit the two up against each other because the mainstream mental health system, in psychomoralistics, we talk about human flourishing, right? And the secular sort of soulless mental health understanding of human flourishing is basically just functioning well, getting through the day, kind of like how they depict on those commercials. And I wanted to ask you what's the difference between, because I can, if I want to play devil's advocate here, I would say, okay, somebody hops on these meds and they're able to get through the day. Well, that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. They can do things that they were once able to do, and they were depressed, and now they're on these meds and they're able to get through the day. That's a good thing. What does psychomoralistics offer that's better than that, I guess?
No, if that's the case, yeah, that is a good thing. Which mean to get through the day. So that's so you have to say. So again, what is human flourishing? Now, I'm in 100% agreement with. I don't have any problem with technology enhancing the humanity, of us, helping us to escape the brutality of trying to survive, or the brutality of physical pain and want. So in a way, in escaping that, we move to a realm where we're blessed to be able to have our acts be more specifically human, not just to survive, but to actually contemplate truth and to, of course, in the Christian order, to bring about God's kingdom. So yeah, we'll do whatever, doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter, what kind of drug it is. If it does that, it's a good thing. Doesn't matter if it's a prescription drug or an illicit drug or what else. We look at all things. Does this help me flourish as a human person? So that's how it's ordered. And of course, that means the same drug can do one or other thing too, depending on how it's ordered and who the person is. So that's how you factor that stuff in. Things aren't intrinsically evil in the world. So it's all about proper ordering and what good you're trying to achieve. And we destroy a lower good to achieve, we destroy a higher good to achieve a lower good, then of course, you're not achieving human flourishing. So then the question being then, the psychotropic medications, at least wise, those that would tend to dull the senses or be a means of blocking out reality or reducing one's sensitivity to reality, would be something then that would be contrary to human flourishing. So, but a medication that can help you suffer well, it would be a good thing. Medication that, that there's oftentimes the need to go into that pain, that depth is okay. So I suppose, but it's however, the essential ingredient then being that in the soul, okay, it's different than the physical, because if you alleviate the physical pain, like we say, if we're in a place where we could actually be free enough to, well off enough physically to contemplate truth and to really live a very high level of human existence, if you will, we're going to be more in touch with the deepest sorrows of the soul. And those sorrows need to be said yes to. So even in my wanting to flourish physically, or to have cessation of pain, or an increase of pleasure or health or what have you, is not so I can escape the cross of existence, but this way I can stand up, pick up that cross, and walk that way. But it's going to be, nonetheless, it is still about that piercing of the heart, piercing of the soul, saying yes to that. So ordering all things toward that. And ultimately then, unto, to that physical death. So
Yeah, I think I think a lot of people might have questions about this whole idea of suffering well, because ultimately that's why people seek out help. It's because they're suffering, and as we know, everybody suffers to some extent. That's a reality of life. But what does that mean to suffer well? Because I think that's at the root, is it not, of anybody who's going to seek some sort of psychological help, some sort of
psychomoral.
Sure, yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, see, now of course that's not really why people seek the intervention of the mental health system. They seek an intervention of the mental health system to somehow have a cessation of that suffering. And again, there's, regardless, especially when there's some sort of deep manifestation that comes out in, if you will, these behavioral or mental aberrations, it's going to be something that has to do with reality, has to do with a deep suffering, pain, injury that they've received and that they're enslaved to, and that they remain to be enslaved to unless they're able to suffer it well, allow it to have a purgative or cleansing process in their soul where they actually reduces their own pride and self-love and no longer festers in that soul with the resultant symptomology, but now is actually becomes a good. All things turn to the good. For those that love God, for those that love reality, that say yes to reality, it turns to good for them, even though that reality, yes, it hurts, it's painful, but it allows a transformation in the soul then, and they're able to mature as a human person in the Imago Dei, being able to sense the truth and choose the good.
Yeah, so I guess that'd be the first step, obviously, for somebody who's looking for help. They're going through some sort of struggle in life, some sort of deep, painful, stage of suffering in their life, is they'd have to accept, and like you said, you say yes to reality. So you're going through something happens, and you don't ignore or try and cope with the fact that, this is how I feel, this is what's going on. Whereas I feel like a lot of people, the pain, they sort of, them trying to cope with whatever it is they're going through, that causes more misery, which is obviously it's not what they want. But so would you say that's the first step with the whole process, is, as you said, you say yes to reality. You don't ignore some suffering that's obviously there. You don't try and cope with it. You embrace the fact that, okay, this is what's going on. Is that the first step?
Well, that's the first step in anything. We have can you have situational awareness, and you so you can improve situation. Now, you can't have situational awareness in life unless you're open to reality. So again, sometimes you can't be fully open to reality. Well, you're trying to concentrate on something else. But here we're talking about kind of a baseline reality that the more we mature in the image of God, the more we then are saying yes to that reality. But it is a maturation process. And so that's exactly what it means to mature a human person.
Yeah. What would be, Doc, and we'll wrap up here, but what would be an example of, somebody who maybe has been really harmed by the mental health system? How do you sort of repair that? How do you remedy that for somebody who's going looking for help? They're in the mental health system for 5-10 years or however long it is, and because I imagine there's a lot of people who's, okay, well, nothing worked, nothing happened, And we're saying obviously nothing happened because, it's based on this symptomology that's giving you a so-called remedy that obviously is not working. It's actually making matters worse. How would you deal with somebody like that, or how do you remedy that sort of situation?
A person's coming to us from the mental health system should see this as not only the viable alternative to the failed mental health system, but it's actually the antidote to it. So the process is going to tell, first, of course, there's going to be a mindset change, which they probably already have to some extent if they're leaving that system. Realizing, that is not based on mental health. Mental health system is not based on science. That's just systematic body of knowledge, integrated systematic body of knowledge. Psychomorphics is based on that, but it's in a way that's totally contrary to the way have experienced in the mental health system. So it's going to be a new thing and a different thing, but it does require sort of conversional process. So the first is in the mind. You have to assent to the truth, and that's explicated what the truth is. And then it's in the heart or in the will. You have to choose that as a good. Now, part of the process, sometimes if they come from the mental health system to psychoanalytics, work with one of our clinicians, then they're going to possibly be on medication. And a person often wants to get off the medication, they'll try to do it on their own or do it too quickly, even under the auspices of their psychiatrist or provider, weaning out it too soon. Now, in psychoanalytics, we're going to have the person learn psychoanalytics, apply psychoanalytics, make psychoanalytics their own before they even attempt to wean off very slowly any medication they're on. It's all varies on the medication, and that's we let them do that with whoever prescribed the medication and tell them you want to wean off this, but we'll tell them if we think it's going too fast. We'll say try to do it slower. That's usually the case, but because weaning out the medication itself is going to be therapeutic. It's because you're going to have that reduction. You're going to be more sensitive to reality. You can be more sensitive to your sorrows, to your pains, and therefore more apt to what? Try to escape the reality. You turn away from it in a self-pity and depression, or try to alleviate it some other way. So that's when we try to help the person suffer well. They already been practicing, know how to do it. Now we're doing it on this level as they wean out the medication.
So to wrap up, when we're talking about this behavioral symptomology of the mental health system, somebody goes and they're looking for help. The mental health system sees the symptoms and they base the disease purely off of those symptoms, and I guess you could say helps the person function well, helps the person get through the day. In psychoanalytics, you look at the symptoms, you figure out the cause of those symptoms, what's causing that, and instead of helping somebody function or get through the day, you push somebody, you help facilitate that process of human flourishing, of living that free life, of living that liberated life where you're not a slave to your own, to your own flesh, or a slave to, your own environment. You're assenting to truth, you're choosing the good.
Yeah. You're not enslaved to your egoistic passions. You're not manipulated through those egoistic passions, not manipulated by persons or principalities. And, as well, but the question being then, so if life is about just getting through, if life is riding a roller coaster, and you think the best way to do this is to white knuckle it with your eyes closed, like that, okay? Or is life something to experience and to have courage derived from love of truth and the good, and to flourish in that, and not to be dominated by our fears, but rather to be encouraged by our love. So it is a different way of living. And true psychoanalytics is about that love and courage, which will allow human flourishing because it allows human freedom from all those enslavements, from all those manipulations. And unfortunately, the mental health system and its providers are part and parcel of that enslavement.
Very good. All right, thanks, Doc. That's where we'll wrap up. That's episode 6 of the Soul Deep Science podcast. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks, Doc.
You're welcome, Trey. Peace be with you.